As Nigeria grapples with the ongoing harsh and bad governance protests, we are reminded that effective communication is crucial in a time of crisis. Today, we are examining the critical role of strategic communications in protests. How do governance or the government officials, protest leaders, and media shape the narrative and influence of public opinion? I mean, yesterday we delved into this situation, and there was a bit of the media might have done this, or the government should have done this, always pointing fingers. So now let's look at possible solutions. This is what we would be delving into: the information ecosystem, exploring how social media, traditional media, and even word of mouth impact protest momentum. We'll also discuss the consequences of uninspiring speeches by government officials, the spread of hate speech and misinformation, and the lack of crisis and communication. Joining us are experts in communications, politics, and also social activism. Together, we're going to analyze the successes and failures of communication strategies employed during the protests and also explore the best practices for promoting peaceful and productive dialogue. We have in the studio Mr. Ahmed Ali. He is a fact checker at the Center for Democracy and Development, joining us, and later, of course, we will be joined, hopefully, via Zoom shortly with David Okoji. But before that, let's talk to Ahmed Ali. You saw how... Good morning, by the way.
Good morning.
It's good to have you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for...
So you saw how this whole protest then started. Before the 1st of August, there was almost 3 weeks of announcement on social media saying this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And it was close to the protest before the government started announcing, oh, there is room for dialogue. But based on former or other protests that happened, the leaders of this protest were saying they don't feel comfortable coming out to have that dialogue with the presidency or the government at that time. Why do you think that it got late before there was that push for dialogue?
Okay, thank you very much for having me here. I think the whole issue goes back to the time when the Tinubu administration was inaugurated. The entire communication strategy, the entire communication plan, the entire personnel was handling these issues. The government didn't have to wait till some set of people are coming out to protest before you engage them constructively. Look at the ministers, the presidential spokespersons and all. They are expected to be everywhere, on every TV station, social media, radio stations and all. Even across the street, you're supposed to feel the impact of the government. They are supposed to communicate to the people, not because the people want them to communicate, but it's because it is one of the things they're expected to do. As the government of the day, considering that you came in with just 37% of the total vote, that's quite unpopular. You have to, as much as possible, try all mechanisms, try all channels to ensure that, okay, you get everybody on board. For a government that says, okay, we are meeting, for instance, you said, okay, you made the economy at a collapse. What are the things you've done in over 1 year to change the things around? The people need you to be there. It's not when they say, okay, we want to protest, you now say you want to dialogue with them. Those who want to protest, they have the right to protest. They are coming, they have their concerns. You listen to what they are saying, hunger in the land, every issue now and then. Is it at this time you're supposed to bring them on board? Look at their key players, look at the key figures in this protest, look at the people who have genuine concerns, bring them on board, speak with them. Alongside that, the people, the masses, get them to know what you are doing. It was until after the protest, after the president communicated, that we started seeing flyers of the things they are doing, the whole issue, we are doing this, we are doing that. Did they have to wait till everything has scattered before they did that?
Okay, now, I like the fact that you started off facing just Tinubu's administration,
Yes.
but is it just a Tinubu administration's problem? Because we see that previous administrations have had an issue with communicating with Nigerians, putting out the right information for Nigerians to see as at when due. At this point, is it just a Tinubu's administration problem, or it's a Nigerian government problem? And, you know, what's the way forward with that?
Okay, just like I said earlier, in recent times, the Tinubu administration seems to be one of the unpopular government. Other governments that came before Tinubu administration probably had that issue, but because they had a lot of popular people on their sides, they were able to manage it. And then the Tinubu administration coming is supposed to look at what the other administrations did wrong, and that should be where they start their own from. Let's say, okay, For example, the Muhammadu Buhari administration, there was a time people were begging that, okay, the president should even come out and speak to us. Tinubu administration coming on board shouldn't toe that part again. You are expected to communicate to the people as and at when due. All the media, I think we have about 4 or 5 media special advisors on communication, media and all. What's the duty of all these people? They're expected to social media, attend spaces, even the ones they were invited or not, attend spaces on Twitter, Instagram Live, talk to the people, let them know what you are doing. On TV stations, just tune to TV stations, tell Trust TV and the likes, you want to come on board, explain to people what you are doing. The more you communicate, the more people understand, okay, these are the things you are doing. You don't have to wait till, or you don't have to toe the part that made the other governments fail. You don't have to toe that part as well.
All right. So, Ahmed, let's talk about, I mean, at this point, the blame game, let's move past it. Yes. Let's look for possible solutions, because as much as we saw Nigerians getting angry at the government, obviously even the protests and people dying and properties being lost did not yield the desired result of saying at least remove some hunger from the mouths of Nigerians. But so far, you made examples of learning from the previous administration, yes, but there are many ways. So as someone who is an expert when it comes to communication, how can the government official effectively communicate to address grievances and reduce tension? Because we saw how the lack of communication led to this tension when Nigerians said we have to come out on the street. So how can the government, moving forward, make plans to officiate effective communication process?
Firstly, the government has to streamline their communication plans and strategies. Over time, we've seen 2 or more advisors churning out different. There was a time the president was supposed. One of the advisors said the president would brief the National Assembly when he clocked 1 year in office. Another person tweeted that the president will not brief the National Assembly. These are some of the gaps they have to breach. That's firstly. Secondly, you look at the social media pages. There are more birthday and felicitations from the presidency to people. They should do less of this and focus more on
social media handle of who?
The check the Aso Villa Instagram handle and you see like 3 on a row, the president felicitating people doing birthdays and all. These are not the core duties. They should do more of informing the people, letting the people know that, okay, these are the things we are doing. Thirdly, I think overall, the government that says they made a bad economy, they are too flamboyant. They are spending too much on things that are unnecessary. I do not see the reason why we have about 48 ministers on ground at the moment. These are some of the things that the government has to show on their part that, okay, we actually do understand the general issues and we understand the current issues, and so they should lead by example. Also, there is distrust. The people do no longer trust the government. You tell us, okay, we are removing fuel subsidy, we are bringing CNG buses. How many have we seen on the street? It doesn't really have to do with communications. It is more of what you're doing.
Distrust was because there was that communication breach.
Exactly what I'm saying. Now that we want to bridge the gap, how many of the buses are on ground? How many are you planning to bring on board? The people understand, yes, a lot is not going fine, but the way you communicate these things to them would bridge the gap. And as much as possible, all the presidential spokespersons have to be on ground. They have to be working as much as possible. They need to bring media persons on board. The weekly press briefing is not enough where the minister comes after the Federal Executive Council meeting. You have to do much more than that across social media, across traditional media. You have to engage the people. You have to all agencies and parastatals like National Orientation Agency and the likes. They have to understand that, okay, it is their responsibility as well. Now, away from the federal level, let's come to the state and the local government. The governors, what are they doing as well? They have to explain to the people. The governors, they are expected to be everywhere. Look at the aftermath of this protest. How many governors have spoken to their people? How many of them have said, okay, the president is trying?
State governor. We saw
a handful of them.
I think Benue also said they.
By now, all the 36 states governors should have attended media interviews and all and explained that, okay, they are doing this, they are doing that. The local governments, I'm sure not in every state have local government chairmen, but then the ones that are functional, they should be with their people, explain to their people. They should use indigenous languages. Enough of all these coming on channels, the mainstream media, and speaking English. Let them go back to the local, to the grassroots. Speak with the people. Let them understand that if it's about setting up all these grassroots initiatives, during the campaign, you saw the way they worked. you could see their posters, campaign, billboards, and all everywhere. Every channel, there was the newspapers as well. You were seeing the campaigns and adverts, and then they came into government and everything died down. So they have to activate all those communication channels and bridge the gap as much as possible.
All right, now let's talk about, it's a good thing, I was going to touch on that, but you eventually did, talking about getting to the grassroots and doing it in indigenous languages, because Nigeria doesn't just consist of the elites who understand just English. You have people who would really want to get this information. But now let's talk about communication in protest on the part of Nigerians. Let's do a little throwback to the NSAS period. They had a list of what they wanted. They had people talking about it. They had influencers talking about it. Now, what are the roles, or what role do social media influencers, because they are becoming really popular in Nigeria, and they are shaping the mindset of Nigerians with putting out contents that are not even, sometimes not related to the problems that are happening in Nigeria. So what role do social media influencers and opinion leaders play in shaping protest narratives, especially looking at this protest that's going on at the moment? What are those critical roles that they are missing out on that they should have taken upon themselves?
Okay, thank you very much. For someone that, my undergraduate project was on social media, so I understand a lot. When people come on social media to agitate, it's mostly people of varied interests. So the first point is getting everybody on board and achieving a common goal. For instance, some sort of people will say, okay, it is the electricity tariff that is their problem, they need to come down. Some will say they're affected by the hike in fuel prices. Some will say it's so the first thing for social media opinion shapers is for everybody to come on board and have a common goal. Once you have a common goal, you present it to the government. Dialogue should be at the forefront, not protest. You would realize that in Nigeria now, any small thing, we're already saying we want to protest. Dialogue should come first. Let everybody come and sit on the table. Look at the whole labor issue, minimum wage and all. Dialogue. At the end of the day, they probably got a fair deal. So I think social media influencers and opinion shapers should not always rule out dialogue. Dialogue is very, very important. Secondly, the protests, everybody has different opinions and ideas about protests. So people believe if it doesn't go violent, they won't achieve their results. As much as possible, we should understand that there are ways we can engage the government, even with protest, and everything would end peacefully. I saw some, I think it was a video of Mr. Adeyoju at the MK Abiola Stadium, where he was explaining to the Commissioner of Police, those are the right and matured ways to, you don't have to, I saw another video too where someone was trying to, a rifle and all, he was trying to engage with security personnel. These are not the best ways to engage in this kind of things. Dialogue would solve a lot of problems. Let's try as much as possible that we get our opinions together and achieve a common goal.
Indeed. Getting the opinions together is the most important one. All right, but then basically, talking about the outcome of this protest, what we're looking at the loopholes in organizers of this protest. How would you say after we come out? Let's another angle. You've seen the demands of Nigerians, even though it's not so clear, because that was what the government held on to as power, saying, you're saying end bad governance. What exactly do you want?
It's not streamlined.
It was
everyone
exactly
wants
not
this, everyone wants that.
There was different placards. One was what we know, it was hunger protest, but then in that hunger there is insecurity, which we had someone from the presidency come here to talk to us about it, and when I spoke about insecurity, he said, but that was not the major concerns of Nigerians. We did not see it. We saw hunger and end bad governance. So how, moving forward, we're not hoping for another protest, we're hoping for the dialogue. So moving forward, how can the organizers streamline their concern into one that would actually make them achieve exactly what they're pushing for?
Okay, I think from that regard, I may not have enough to say, but on a personal note, these influencers, they know themselves. They know who has the top voice. If I tweet something now, it will probably get 10 or 15 engagements. But if an influencer tweets something, he knows how far it would reach. So these people have to come together, like I said. If it's to forming a coalition, if it's to forming an association or something, they have to come together. And still what I said earlier, streamline what they want. Let's say for youth, our major issues are electricity. We need the tariff is too high. You want them to full the people who are drive around and haul food and haul. It's simple. You dialogue with the Minister for Communications and Digital Economy. You don't even have to start with the president. Dialogue with the Minister for Communication and Digital Economy.
That'll be holding everybody
accountable. Let everybody know, okay, we are coming to meet you now. Send them letters. Post it on social media. We send this so letter to the Minister of Communication and Digital Economy. We're expected to meet him. If you want it televised, let it be televised. Meet him. Let him know your concerns. These data providers, they are charging too much. You are the government agencies that are supposed to regulate them. Meet with them. If it's on food security, meet with the ministers. If it's on housing, the increase in rent and all, hold each head of government parastatals accountable. Let them come forward. Give them a timeline. Within the next 3 months, Mr. Minister, this is what we expect you to do. This is what we expect your office to do. Let everybody be the judge. You understand? Let the public be the judge. Okay, at so point we engage him. We expect that in so time. Let's look at the president when he formed his cabinet and then he appointed Adis Abala Osman as SA policy coordination. They said they would do performance bond and all. After 1 year or so, we don't have any performance bond to judge them and rate them. Personally, I know some ministers that shouldn't be in office till now, but who is holding them accountable? And they are being paid with the money, with taxpayers' money. So these are some of the things that we have to start holding people accountable. And the social media would help. Yes, the social media will go a long way in that regard.
All right. Joining us via Zoom, we have David Okoji. He's the Director of Special Duties National Orientation Agency in Abuja. Good morning, David.
A very good morning to you.
Yeah. So, David, you definitely are in Nigeria, so you have seen exactly what went on in this protest that Nigerians came out to do and how the aim has not really been achieved. So what are the consequences of poor crisis communication and how they can be avoided?
You see, the consequences of poor crisis communication are very grave, as we can already see on the streets of Nigeria in many states. Now, this poor crisis communication, we can look at it sectorially from various stakeholders that are participating in managing this protest that is ongoing. On the side of the proponents of the protest and the leadership, even the way they have named the protest, does not help matters at all. That name, hashtag end hunger, yes, is apt because there's hunger in the land, but then the addendum that says 10 days of rage, what can be achieved in an environment of rage, of national rage? Rage connotes an absence of coordinated reasoning, of calm think through of processes and plans. So when they communicate it as 10 days of rage, it feeds into the kind of narrative that the criminals and miscreants who have taken over the protest would want. And that's why we're seeing looting, we're seeing breaking into shops, we're seeing blocking of roads and smashing of vehicles and burning of vehicles, So I think that that is a lesson to be learned, in the case of this kind of protests. I also think that communication with citizens, like your panelist who's sitting in the studio said, it should be diverse. At the National Orientation Agency, we are trying to demarcate our audiences and know their needs and preferred communication platforms. And we're responding. But I agree with your panelists in the studio that response must not be episodic, that it must be ongoing and consistent, and that it must create platforms where the youths can also voice out their issues, their challenges, and also make inputs into policies, programs, and activities. To that extent, I agree with him. Now, in terms of how we have managed, you can see that our security agencies have been communicating. The Inspector General of Police engaged with the identified segment, and I use the word segment advisedly, because there are various interest groups driving these protests. It's not a one unified group that you are looking at. The only visible group, significantly visible groups that you can see on the national landscape is the Take It Back group. And the Inspector General of Police engaged with them, as you already know. And that engagement has been ongoing. Now, in terms of opinion molders, traditional rulers, and politicians at very, very high places, you also saw that they came out and they were making appeals. I think in addition to the appeals that are being made, which we are very grateful for at the National Orientation Agency, we think that traditional rulers and religious leaders should also be empowered in such a way that what they say and how they engage with the youth becomes significantly impactful. That sometimes they should talk about the policies, programs, and activities of government inside of their worship centers. You know, people go to mosque, they go to church every week, you know, and then they go and listen soberly. There's no argument. You know, the environment is a sober environment. So it's conducive for communicating government policies, programs, and activities that are beneficial, you know, to the youth. So I think in addition to this plea they are making, they should also talk about some of these programs in the mosque and in the churches, you know, as part of their contribution. That's an innovation we can bring into the communication strategy in this. Then the media, the way the media have communicated these protests and the crisis around it creates an impression that they are taking sides. You know, there's not enough of communication from the media about the interventions that government have done, you know, in several sectors of our economy. So I think there should be some kind of a balance, you know, on the side of the media. Okay. As you are communicating the protest itself and the reasons why the protests are going on, there should also be robust communication of the policies, programs, and activities that government is putting out to mitigate this recognized cost of living crisis, you know, that we're going through.
All right. Thank you, sir. You've pointed out a couple of things that has piqued our interest. Now, I love the fact that you mentioned the media playing their role and creating balanced reportage. But the media have access to information that is being put out there. And we believe that it is the role of the National Orientation Agency to put out this information, break it down to the understanding, hence the media pick it up from there and put it across to Nigerians the best way they can. So would you say the National Orientation Agency has broken down the policies the government have made to the understanding of the basic Nigeria in such a way that it will be easily accessible to the media?
Yes, uses the communication platforms that we have. For instance, the Explainer. The Explainer is an e-news journal which by this time we had hoped that most media houses would include in their newspaper reviews that you do every morning. The Explainer electronic journal comes out every week, and it clearly explains various policies, programs, and activities of government. So if that has not been included in newspaper review by media houses, we would greatly appreciate if you can include this. It will be an appreciable corporate social responsibility on the part of all media platforms to do this, because this will also help people who are your audience, who listen to you, to clearly understand the policies, programs, and activities that government is carrying out to bring succor to the people. In addition to that, we have enabled an artificial intelligence component on our website. If you go to www.noa.gov.ng today, even as I speak with you, you will encounter that artificial intelligence persona. We'll call it Clean. And Clean is able to explain in details any government policy, program, and activities that any youth around the country wants to find out about. In terms of how we're doing this at the grassroots, our community orientation and mobilization officers who speak local languages, you know, engage with community members to explain these policies and programs and to show community people how they can key in.
All right.
But I agree with your man in the studio that this needs to be far more consistent, you know, than it is presently because of the constraints of funding, you know. And I also agree that as private media houses like Trust, NOA should engage with you in a matter that reflects your corporate social responsibility, but also meets your requirement for funding to keep the stations going. Right, so there's a challenge of funding. We don't want to talk about this.
David, I wanted to actually get you on that. When you say corporate social responsibility, in the first place, media is even there to serve as a corporate social responsibility. And I wanted to ask why or how, if at all, the orientation is reaching out to the media houses to say, okay, we have something like this that we need people to know. But then now you've answered that, taking that fault and not blaming the media for that. But let's talk about, if at all you have this website, what about the people on the grassroots, people that do not have access to social media to even understand what explainer is? If there is one thing we have learned from this protest, is that majority of people that came out are ignorant. Majority of people that went violently into this protest, taking it as something violent, is that they do not even have the knowledge of what this government is doing. So there is a huge gap. They feel that the government is detached from them. And that is the work of your own agency. So what other efforts? You talked about funding, but what effort have you done to reach out to these people in order for them to understand, say, this is what the government is doing currently, and it might not seem like it, but then this is what we are hoping to achieve and the time?
So I have said to you that in every local government in this country, the National Orientation Agency has offices, and the people who are in charge of those offices are called Community Orientation and Mobilization Officers. They are present in all the 774 local governments. And our policy of recruitment at that level is to recruit people who speak the local languages, who are known by the local people. And they do communication of government policies, programs, and activities through enlightenment of various stakeholder groups, through youth groups, through women societies and their groups, through traditional rulers and religious leaders. This is the way we're doing it. Now, Nigeria is a country of over 200 million population. For you to cover grounds using this strategy in an appreciable manner, you certainly need to be always in the face of the people. You need to be moving from community to community. You need to be present, where gatherings are happening so that you can engage people, and all of that. So yes, there's need to be be more consistent, but that also requires funding.
All right. I think the funding part would have to go with the government, because the people really need to feel the impact and the process of what the government is doing. That is the promise of the president, after all. Thank you so much, Mr. David. I appreciate you for joining us. I know we definitely need to see more to talk about these things, because we have a whole lot of questions in order to do the social corporate responsibility, like you said. I appreciate you, Mr. David Akoji. All right, back to the studio, Aluko. Quickly, how can fact-checking and media literacy initiatives help mitigate the spread of false information? We saw a lot of false information during this protest period.
Okay, thank you very much. From our hand at the Center for Democracy and Development in West Africa, we did a lot of fact checks and that trended on issues, videos, and images. Some of the videos and images were from the past, from the NSAS, other protests, that were now brought forward and painted like, okay, they happen now. So fact-check organizations like ours, we did a lot to debunk some of these claims, and then a lot of people shared them, and so it doused the detention and then countered the disinformation in that regard. Secondly, we do more of explainers and pre-bunking and debunking. We preempt that, okay, this would likely be what will be the narrative in the next maybe 2-3 days. So we try as much as possible to get the right angle to that. Instead of playing a catch-up, we go ahead of those. So before they even start to spread, we already did our explainers and pre-bunking in that regard. Also, we try as much as possible to meet with all these, speak with all these government institutions, security agencies and all, and ask them, because most times when the conventional media reports, they report from one side. So what we do is report from this side, report from the government side as well. Like, let's say, okay, we ask the government institutions, maybe the security institutions, okay, what's the angle to this, what's the angle to... Then we do all we know. So we are bringing your own counter and their own counter and placing in front of people, okay, be the judge. So these are some of the things we do. We do explainers, we do fact checks, fact shields, pre-bunking and debunking, so as to reduce the spread of information disorder, because it's actually a whole lot of problems. Most of the issues that stem from this protest, they were as a result of mis and disinformation. You can imagine behind your backyard, you are seeing videos that someone has been killed, and then you look back and you don't see anything. But before you know it, a lot, it has gone viral.
Indeed. So we saw even the National Assembly being burned, but it was only a picture and all of that.
As much as possible, it's not supposed to be the work of the fact checks alone. Even the conventional media as well. You're supposed to have fact checking teams and hams that do most of these things even before you report them. We've seen several they retrace their steps and be like, okay, this didn't happen. it was in Herald that we published. Some of these things shouldn't happen. We're supposed to be the gatekeepers. We're supposed to be the one that's, okay, it didn't happen. And so you know that, okay, it didn't happen, because the more fake news spreads, the more people tend to accept it. Of course, it brings tension. I appreciate that. Had to just put it out there. Conventional media try to do balance as well. I think you're talking about influencers where they go with one side of the story, but I appreciate you, Ahmed Alunko, for joining us to dissect this topic today. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me. All right. And with that, of course, we are going to take a break on this segment. And when we come back, we'll take a look at the front pages of the national dailies. We'll be right back.